Dr. Vipul asked me to talk on lab management, and I chose the most difficult part of lab management which I've gone through, and that is man management. And along with that, Dr. Vipul also told me about a brief discussion on accreditation and quality, but I don't know how much I'm going to do that. But without any slides, I will be in a position to ask questions on how our journey of accreditation is actually going to benefit our patients. So with that, I'll just take you through. So this is what I have outlined: leadership and vision, understanding capability, human resource motivation, and finally, if time permits, and we can discuss on minimum standards of quality. So, I'm no management expert. I'm a pathologist. 1995, I completed my post-graduation from Sion here in Mumbai, and I joined Anand Diagnostic Laboratory. And ever since, I've been there through the thick and thin of excitement and challenges that go with. But I must tell you, each one of us should consider ourselves fortunate to be in this field. I think we have been given that space and opportunity to do things to our patients that not many clinicians also can do. So let's start with that note. These are my personal views which I'm going to share. And it's not prescriptive, it's only descriptive. We can discuss through. I'm going to learn from those discussions as well. So when I joined the lab, this was my view. I was looking at each tree very detailedly, correct? And it was amazing. I was looking at histopath, hemat, doing all the work on a daily basis. We do things every day, isn't it? We do things and continue to do things. So why shouldn't we be called human doings? Why are we called human beings? We forget to live in this world. We have to be in this world while we are doing it, and that's where the mind takes it away. We forget that we are in this world. From this view, over the last 10 years, I've got this view. And this is the forest view. And this is amazing, because I know when I get the forest view, I know where the gaps are. I can dive deep down, understand what needs to be done there, and then take it up. If I have this view, there is no way 10 kilometers away, there is a bald patch of forest. How do I help that plant? So I keep looking at under my microscope, and I'm never able to get the view that I would want to see here. So with that background, I will start with asking each one of you, it all started with this leadership thought. Leadership is the art of accomplishing more than the science of management says it's possible. It's not a concept or anything. It's just that being present is enough for the leadership. But what is important is the vision. I think each one of us here are either owning a lab or part of a lab or part of the management of the lab. It can be at any level. I have a fundamental question. Each one of you, do you have a vision for your lab? Please raise your hands. Has that vision been documented? Please raise your hands. Has that documented vision been shared with each and every staff in your lab? Please raise your hands. Yeah, it's important that each of us discuss these things, because I see these are the challenges. If the vision of the person who is at the helm of affairs is only in the mind of the person who is in the helm of affairs, there is no way the staff in the lab are going to move in the same direction. They will move in different directions because they have their own personal visions. There's nothing wrong in having personal visions, but how do you align your personal vision with the... So a leadership creates an inspiring vision of the future. And that's very important. That's the starting point. And he motivates and inspires people to engage with that vision. So the moment you start to have that vision, document it and start providing it to your staff, I think everybody starts moving in one direction. That's when the momentum starts. And when the momentum starts, great things happen. So you need to be aware of that. How do you get the vision to be delivered? And that vision is not going to stop at your staff. Your customers are going to see what that vision is and how each one of our staff are able to convert that vision. Coaches and the leadership coaches and builds team so that it is more effective at achieving the team. So while we can reach out to the staff, tell them what is the vision. I can tell you very clearly, when I was faced with this question myself, it took me a couple of days to actually put it on paper. What is the vision? Because I had to consider the future. And there came the problem. What is it that you put on paper, defining as a vision that spreads across the entire management and everybody aligns to it? Once you have that in place, how do you take it down to every level of your organization? Because believe it or not, there are leaders in your staff without the title as a leader. How do you tap into that talent and understand those people, see that they align with your group vision? So in business, I would not like to call it business, but this was a statement that was out of literature, so I kept it that way. A vision is a realistic, convincing, and attractive depiction of where you want to be in the future. Vision provides direction, very important. Otherwise, we'll be on a ship without any sense of direction. Sets priorities and provides a marker so that you can tell that you have achieved what you wanted to achieve. Otherwise, we'll constantly be on a, what do you call that? That's wheel on which the rabbit or the guinea pig starts running. So we'll be constantly running without achieving anything. Leadership is proactive. It's not reactive. You don't, yes. Yeah.
I thought that vision should be little bit unrealistic.
It's a good point. It's a good point. When you make it unrealistic, the challenge is to get your staff to be convinced that you can reach it. Because if it is unrealistic, how do you get them to be motivated? Okay, it's achievable, it's real, something that is on ground.
Trying to achieve that, even if you get 90% of it, it's more than.
Correct. But then there is a possibility of demotivation if the vision is not achieved. So you do it as a realistic concept so that you have building blocks that you build to reach that realistic vision. I get your point. I completely get your point. Leadership is proactive. It is problem solving, looking ahead, and not being satisfied with things as they are. It's classic. Nothing better than to explain leadership in this form. When I say leadership is proactive, you don't wait for problems to happen to show your leadership. You drive your activities today to ensure that the problems don't arise. And that doesn't mean that problems will not arise. Problems will arise. But how do you put yourself in a place and think and provide that direction to ensure that the problems are minimal when they arise? And this is, most of us look at competition. We look at what the next lab is doing or not doing. If we are to do that, we'll only be good or as bad as the other lab. Instead, why don't you look at yourself right now and say, what is it that I can do better than what I'm doing today? Where is it that I have to put my focus on? Get the forest view. Get the areas where improvement are needed and then fix it. So you need to define, communicate, monitor, and refine the vision. This is over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight. It needs to be done constantly engaging your staff. It's very important your staff be part of this journey, because J.W. Marriott says, look after your staff the way you expect them to look after your customers. Because if you are angry with your staff will be angry with your customers. If you are sarcastic with your staff will be sarcastic with your customers. If you're compassionate with your staff will be compassionate with your customers. And that is fundamental. The only true nature of human being is being compassionate. And when that happens, you will see the energy levels are so high that the customer experience is completely different. That doesn't mean to say disgruntled patients are not going to be there. I've had situations when a patient walks in and says, Doc, your lab is the best in the world. I take my hand to my heart and say, I bow down and say thank you. Soon enough, there's another patient who walks in and says, Doc, your lab is the worst in the world. I still take my hand to my heart and say, I bow down and say thank you. How can I do? What can I do for you? He's come back to tell me because he's a well-wisher. Otherwise, he would have gone out and tell other people. We need to understand why he is so upset. The moment you are non-judgmental about the way he has told, it becomes easy for you to listen to him and the content he has to say, because that's powerful. That's so powerful that you have an opportunity without giving money to improve your lab. Otherwise, there is no way you would have improved the lab. So if the vision, for example, this is an example that I'm giving, you set out as a vision to reach out and provide the best care to patients. You define this, put it on the wall, start thinking about this. The moment you think, you feel. Because feeling is the body's reaction to a thought. If you think, you feel. When you feel, you act. In every action of yours in the lab, if it is in the direction of the vision that you state, believe me, everybody aligns in that direction. I'm sure most of you in this audience already have a vision. You are already acting in that sense of a vision. So your staff are very comfortable. They know what your vision is and how they have to behave, even if you have not documented the vision. But documenting the vision and sharing it is going to be really beneficial for them to understand. So typically, when the senior management or even a small lab, there is a strategy that needs to be implemented. It is always top down. The strategy comes from the leader, and he or she has defined a strategy, and that needs to be implemented right down the ladder to the front office executives. Now, having a strategy alone is not sufficient. You need to implement the strategy, isn't it? How do you implement the strategy? That's when it gets reversed. The senior management now serves the front office executive to implement the strategy. You can never just tell, do this and walk away. That's impossible, because the staff do not know how they will have to implement that strategy. The leader has to provide a way of serving the front office to let them know how they are going to do or implement the strategy. Ken Blanchard is an amazing management guru. He talks about servant leadership. There is a concept called servant leadership. In the servant leadership, strategizing is the leadership component, but implementing the strategy is a servant component, because the top management have to serve the lower down staff to allow them how do you implement that strategy. So it's important to be aware of that. Ken Blanchard. Ken, K-E-N, Blanchard. So from there, I'm moving on to another concept of capability, which I got to know over the past couple of years, And this is an amazing book written by Clayton Christensen, How Will You Measure Your Life? And I think it's amazing to see how he's put the things together in a way we understand. So he's, again, a management guru. So he talks of capability in 3 different aspects. He talks of it as resources, which is visible. Man, machine, material, method, and money. All of these are visible to us. You can feel it. It's like the ingredients of an amazing dish that we can churn out, isn't it? But just having this doesn't mean you have the dish. The next important thing is the processes. If you do not have processes, you cannot use the resources that you have. That includes training, competence, QC analysis, workflow, calibration. All of these are processes that you cannot touch and feel. They're invisible. But processes are the one that help the resource understand each other and find an ecosystem where there is something coming out of it, sensible. And that leads to Bisi Belabath. So now we have had that. The third component and the most important component in my view is the priority. It's the priority that drives the process to use the resource. If you do not have the priority, and that's where the priority comes from, the vision. If the vision is strong, your priorities are strong. If your priorities are strong, you put processes in place in such a way that your resources, the same resources that you have, are amazingly used. So if your priority could be any of these, there's nothing right or wrong. It's only the situation that exists. It is we who create a judgment whether it is right or wrong. So let us not be judgmental about anything. Just accept the fact that there is a situation, define what our vision is, drive that vision to ensure our priorities are clear, and then the priority will drive you to build processes to the extent that you use resources. So for me, these are the 3 aspects which Clayton Christensen mentioned about. But for me, the outcome matters. If we are here to discuss with each other how to do something, it has to have an end effect of community health, in my view. Or it could be profits. Again, there's nothing right or wrong. It could be academic, it could be reference. There could be a lab that is having a priority of becoming an academic institute. So if that is the outcome that is required, then your priorities will be accordingly, and you would put processes to ensure that you fix the resource accordingly. So capability depends on resources that a lab currently has, processes that are currently in place, and priority of the lab management. And for all of these, it's good to just ask yourself this question, and I asked myself this question many years ago: what is the purpose of life? I'm not talking about life in general. What's the purpose of our life? Each one of us. Has anybody written down purpose of life? I'm sorry I'm asking you this fundamental question because this was asked.
Not written down, but thought of it.
Wonderful.
Remain happy, keep the people around you happy.
Excellent. Sir, one thing which will help is many years ago when I read a book, the author mentioned this. You ask a purpose of life and you say this is all meant for this book, and that's it. Nobody goes beyond. But I asked myself, do I want to find out my purpose of life? I took 3 days to actually write it down. And at the end of 3 days, I wrote down in my notebook that patient care is the purpose of my life. So when I did that, in every act I do in my daily work, it reflects
Have you tried
patient.
to review what is the purpose? Do you review?
It is very important. The purpose of life will change with time. It has nothing to do, it's not written in stone, it's not grounded, it's groundlessness. But what is important is to be aware of what that purpose of your life is, so that your actions are accordingly to that. So, I'm not going to take you through all the experiences of the capability that I have. I'm just going to take you through two of them, and I'm trying to see if I can link to some extent lab management in that. So, all of us do liver function test. Many years ago, when we realized that the liver function includes the proteins, it is not just the albumin and the globulin. I realized that the patterns of the individual proteins and how they interact with each other has a tremendous role to play. So we decided to bring in protein electrophoresis as part of our liver function test. And this we have been doing more than 15 years. And it's a 63-year-old lady who just walked in for a wellness effort. As part of a wellness, she came in. And every part of the chemistry, including echo, everything was normal. But because she got electrophoresis done as part of her LFT, there was a M spike. Now, do you think I've done the right thing or the wrong thing? I would want to learn from this. Did I do right by including protein electrophoresis as part of LFT, or is it not necessary? Yeah, so I always get
I
this.
would like to look at international references or standards where they say what test to be included for. For example, say tumor marker, say is tumor marker cost effective for the patient? If it is not, then I would not want him to spend on.
Correct, but international standards are international standards.
Guidelines.
Guidelines. So would you want to limit yourself by international guidelines?
What is the percentage positivity if you're taking 100 patients?
So if I say 1%,
For the patient.
yeah, if I say 1%,
Sujay, I have thought that if your total protein albumin global and AG ratio is abnormal, maybe this could become a reflex test for all abnormal protein values.
so the next question is, we have had M spikes with normal protein and AG ratio. It is well known. When you have a light chain myeloma, you don't have abnormal proteins. So it's an open question. I'm not here to say what I'm doing is right, but I'm here to trigger that question in your mind.
Suppose if you detect this,
Yes.
is it going to change in patients if you're detecting it early? So what is the percentage of myeloma patients will detect?
So excellent. Now, all this discussion started because the M spike is there. If the electrophoresis was not done, there's no question of this discussions happening, isn't it? So, Dr. Saji from Mayo had come to our lab for a CME workshop, and he said, "What are you guys doing? So many electrophoresis." I said, "It's part of LFT." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, because we have picked up nephrotic pattern, cirrhotic pattern, when people even know about it, and M spikes." At the end of the seminar, he says, "I'll go back and talk to my biochemist, see if I can introduce protein electrophoresis as part of LFT." But that's not the point. The point is, what's the vision? What's the priority? Is it patient care? Then I would want to do this. IgG kappa. Not that this patient has myeloma. This patient has monoclonal gammopathy of uncertain significance. But 10% of every MGUS will get into myeloma every year. How do you monitor? Now, since we know that this person has, we get to monitor.
Give this patient. You are a group of patients, 100 patients coming for your wellness checkup. Right? You have added one test. There are hundreds of thousands of other tests. Right? If you do test 1,000 tests, in a group of say 1,000 patients, you will find lot many what the diseases will be in the incipient stages, in the pre-pathogenic phases. Does that justify? First point. Does it justify? See, there's an endless list of tests you can do.
There are so many tumor markers.
And basically what we have perceived is that for a test has to say well, it has to correlate with the patient's clinical, some complaint has to be there from the patient. Your pathology laboratory has to either deny that you don't have this pathology or you have this pathology.
I'll come to two questions you have posed. One is all those tests that may add value. I'm talking of liver function test.
Even in liver function test, I'm not a very good reader, very good avid reader of journals. But if you go, you will find many other tests which will be contributing to your liver.
Agreed. I'm only looking at the components that is produced by the liver and has a bearing. I'll come to that. The second point, you're talking about the presence of symptoms. I'll use the example of my mother. 2008, absolutely fine. Doing yoga, great. I traveled to Chennai, she was at home. She felt ill. Took her to ultrasound abdomen. 11 centimeter hepatocellular carcinoma. Not tested at all. Now, if I had done her liver function test, was there a way of... So what I'm trying to say is, don't look at it as disease-based. We are into the era of wellness. Are we able to pick up the diseases that we may land up in a couple of years? We are not God. Very clear. We are not God. But as humans, we have the ability to put our minds together and do the relevant things. I'm not telling this is relevant. In your mind, this is already irrelevant. But in my view, it is relevant because of all the patients who have been tested with LFT using electrophoresis, we have picked up nephrotic syndrome, cirrhotic pattern, acute inflammation, chronic inflammation, and MGUS. There are patients who have come back and said, I got to go to an oncologist because you gave me an LFT with electrophoresis. But that's maybe an exception, but not the rule. But what I'm trying to say is, for that patient, it's 100%. So this discussion can go on. There's no end to it. Now we need to see what is the value that we are going to add by doing these things. Dr. Vipul, you need to stop me whenever you have time. Okay. So the paraprotein was picked during wellness check. Skeletal survey was done. It was negative. Bone marrow was 6% plasma cells, normal morphology. Bone marrow cytogenetics normal. Now this is what your concern was. Why was this patient led to unnecessary investigations? The kappa lambda ratio was 23 when the normal is up to 1.65. And the ratio went up to 43 in September 2017 with bone tenderness. She had bone tenderness. She's being evaluated. The last I got to know that she has a lesion in the para-aortic area and the pulmonologist is having a tough time reaching it. And now she comes and tells me, Sujay, after all you have done, you got me to a stage where people have done so many things and now they tell me that there's a lesion next to the aorta and they can't do anything about it. So we believe it's a plasmacytoma, but we have no histological diagnosis. So resource that we had was capillary electrophoresis. Now one of the things is, while I can easily say that you can do electrophoresis, if I was doing it by gel electrophoresis, there's no way I could have even thought of introducing it into LFT. The moment I had a resource like capillary electrophoresis, there was a quick way of capillary electrophoresis, your LFT is done in 10 minutes, like any other chemistry. I can give the result in the same time, the same turnaround time as your liver function test. So that is the resource that we had. The process that we put in was to include it in the LFT. And the priority was what drove us to. If my priority was money, there's no way I would have included electrophoresis in LFT, isn't it? Why would I spend 150 rupees, put it into a LFT and not increase the price. So that is the thought process I have.
Again, one argument, same thing happened with me. And there was a polyclonal gamma, young fellow, 20 years. And then he went on stretching for the cause of that particular polyclonal. ESR of about 80 or 100 and polyclonal gamma. He went on gastroenterologist, here, there to find out the cause. And ultimately he is stressed out and nothing is coming positive. And every time he comes to me, sir, ESR is 90 plus, there is, what is the reason for it? I say, I am not able to answer. So sometimes this test, they create a problem, question mark in the patients.
It's a well-known.
That's what I'm saying, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it is. I can also tell you one thing. Just when you know all of life's answers, God changes all the questions. So, I'm not here to tell you there is an end to this. I'm not here to tell you there's a diagnosis. What I'm trying to tell you is, as part of a community, are we doing good to the community? First, do no harm. I completely agree. But having said that, if you sit quiet, you'll definitely do no harm. But you'll be only sitting quiet, but not adding value to the community. So how do we ensure that we add value to community? So this is in October 1628 electrophoresis. This is just some statistics in which we have all of those patients whom we gave a diagnosis or gave them an indication of what they were going through. So you have different patterns in electrophoresis that can easily let you know what's happening. So the resource was the electrophoresis. The process was including it in the LFT, and that was invisible. But for me, the most invaluable is how do we add value to patient care? And that is what drives me. The next one is we use data science for predictions in clinical lab. We have had a data science department of 2 people for the past 2 years. And we have asked each other a lot of questions, 45 questions to be precise. Some of them are in the science of lab medicine. We are trying to use test results to understand if there's a pattern recognition for us to quickly, with the data that we have, quickly tell the patient that there's something happening, please be aware. The other is a question like this, where it involves a process. Can we predict which patient's result is likely to be delayed? So why did this come out? This came out because when we analyzed our errors and non-conformances and complaints, 60% turned out to be delays. We have about 60,000 patients a month, in which 0.6% were all these complaints, and 70% of that was, or 60% of that was delays. So I asked the data science team, can we predict the delay even before the test is done? And that's what they took up. And then they started to work on the neural network, where they had a bunch of inputs. They took the inputs from the pre-analytical phase, when the sample is collected, transported, reached the lab, reached the department, onto the machine. These are all variables that are fed into the neural network and then converted to a sensible output. So we have developed an algorithm for the pre-analytical part. We are now moving to the analytical and the post-analytical. So this is more complex. So for example, these are the various timestamps: courier opening, TRF scanning, registration, logistics, a whole lot of them, and finally receiving in the departments. These all become inputs for the neural network. Sorry. So when they become inputs, then there are a set of weights and biases that are used to an activation. So this is something, a typical neuron, where you have a lot of inputs and then a single output. This is the typical neural network architecture for the pre-analytical, expert system, analytical, and the post-analytical. And then there's a feedback. The purpose of the feedback is to understand where in the entire process is the sample likely to be delayed. Once we know that, I can put all my effort there and push it through to the next step and avoid the delays to the patient. Now, you might ask, meaning the salary of the data scientist is there, two of them, one of them comes with 13 years of experience. They're sitting and only working on the computers. What are they generating revenue for the lab? Nothing. Only these questions are being answered. These are a little more complex. So, for me, the resource was the data science staff, and that's the visible part. But the process is asking the questions. I think all the learning happens when questions are asked, not when answers are told. You have to ask questions, how can we do better than what we are doing? And that's invisible. But the priority is to add value to patient care. If I'm able to minimize that 0.6% to 0.3%, I think the data science department would have done their job. And that's invaluable. 5 minutes, I'll quickly go through. Keeping your team motivated and happy, and this is always a challenge. How do we call it our team rather than team is called together each achieves more. And motivation is, if you look at this meaning of it, being driven to achieve for achievement's sake, nothing beyond achievement's sake. You do 20 push-ups, you're motivated. Not because you're getting money, but you have done 20 push-ups, you're feeling great. That's achievement. And happiness is, in my view, inner happiness. But all of us are so comfortable getting it from the outside. So it's important to discuss team's success, acknowledge failures. This is the most important. It's very easy to get carried away by the team's success. How do you acknowledge failures and stop being judgmental? Because thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. So the moment we stop judging, it becomes easy. The essence of being human, and that's emotional intelligence. And all of you must have read this one time or the other. When you look at emotional intelligence, particularly for the leadership, at any level, self-awareness, the ability to know one's own emotions. If I know what I am going through, I'm in a better position to be in the situation where my staff is. I'm able to handle my own disruptive emotions. So if I'm aware of myself, I can self-regulate. I can control and redirect disruptive emotions. And the one key thing is about empathy. Empathy is considering other people's feeling when making decisions. We often miss this point, but it's a very crucial point. Once we have empathy, we have social skill, the ability to manage relationships, to move people in the desired direction. And that's where I'm talking about vision. Once you have set a vision, how do you move people in the desired direction? And finally, motivation. This is a cartoon of a horse-driven carriage. Who do you I need this to be interactive. Who do you think is in charge? How many of you for the horse? Please raise your hands. How many of you for the driver? Please raise your hands. How many of you for the passenger? Please raise your hands. All three. That's where the confusion arises. Each person will go in all different directions. So, this was from a book written by a NASA scientist on active consciousness. And she asks, who is in charge? And in her analogy, she says a horse is a physical body, the physical being. The driver is the mind. And that is an automatic one. So even before I tell you that, for me, the passenger wants to go from point A to point B. He wants to go from here to the airport. So he better be in charge, correct? Now, if he goes to sleep, what will the driver do? The driver doesn't know where to go. He goes to the railway station. So, the moment the passenger is fast asleep, the driver takes over and he becomes the ego. And that's where we lack awareness of our own thoughts. And that's outer happiness, consciousness, or passenger is inner happiness. So, there are many things which I would not want to, I think it's
Just this point. Is the Dr. Arpit Agarwal? Arpit Agarwal needs to check out immediately.
Dr. Arpit Agarwal.
Is he here?
No problem. Keeping employees happy. I think now with proper HR happening, how many of you in this group have a formal HR? Please raise your hands. Wow. Okay. So we outsource it to the HR or we become part of the HR? We become part of the HR. We can never, I think each one of us have an HR in ourselves. What the HR department can do is only put a formal structure to place. Otherwise, it can never be anything more than that. How many of you have training and opportunities for the staff? I'm sure everybody has. Great. Do you see value in it?
Yes.
And what is the kind of value you see?
They become the leader. They themselves become the leader.
Are you providing it so that they don't leave the organization?
They get motivated.
To give better results to the patient satisfaction. It works.
So if you know that this person is going to leave, would you allow it?
Yeah, definitely. Ultimately, he is going to serve the patient somewhere else. In my lab, or lab, his lab.
That part is not
that
done.
doesn't.
So these are views of each one of us, and this can be debated. This can be debated for many hours, but I would want to hear Dr. Milind talk on machines. So when I get off my car, there's a competition between the security and myself, who's going to tell good morning first. Because I get motivated when he's all ready to say, and I say even before that I got you. I think this is very important. One cannot underestimate the importance of walking into the office as the manager with a smile on my face and making sure I give the same feeling of importance to everyone. I think that's fantastic, because when you have that empathy, the social skill, you are able to provide that energy level in your organization. Recognize and reward employees. I think these are all standard guidelines, but I can tell you that informal, in the corridor appreciation, a handshake is extremely valuable. So if you do come across a time when you have just express gratitude for nothing, can you do that? Can you say thank you for a person who has not done anything? That person will say, are you crazy? What are you thanking me for? But it's not for the other person to tell, but for you to enhance your own self. I'm sorry, I'm just going through this because I seem to be going beyond time. Best benefit you can provide for your employees, the opportunity to make a difference through their work and help guide the course of the company. If you don't make your staff part of the activity that you're doing, believe me, there is no motivation. It's going to be done as a mechanical stuff. Strong people don't put others down, they lift them up. So if employees feel better about their jobs, they are less likely to leave. Even more importantly, they will try to do better at what they do. Thank you very much.